The fluorescent lights hummed, a sickly yellow glow reflecting off the polished wood of the courtroom tables. The air conditioning was too high, a chill seeping into the cheap fabric of my dress, but it wasn't just the temperature making my skin crawl. It was his voice. Smooth, confident, dripping with carefully constructed sincerity as he spoke the lies. My husband. Ex-husband, soon to be. He sat across the room, looking every bit the wronged man, his eyes wide and innocent as he denied everything. Denied the woman, the endless nights spent away, the money siphoned off, the future he'd promised me while building another life with someone else. My lawyer shifted beside me, a low, calming presence, but I barely heard her quiet breathing over the roaring in my ears. He was so good, so utterly convincing. I could almost believe him myself, the way he spun the narrative of my supposed paranoia, my unreasonable jealousy. The judge watched him, impassive, a figure carved from stone, but I saw a flicker in her eyes, a hint of leaning towards his performance. This was it, the moment of truth, built on a foundation of his lies and my crumbling world. My hand tightened under the table, nails digging into my palm. In that grip was not just fear, but the cold, hard weight of certainty. He thought he'd won. He thought he could lie his way out of everything. He didn't know what I had. Not yet. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by his even breathing and the distant sounds of the city outside. The lie hung in the air, solid and suffocating, daring me to challenge it. And I would. Oh, I absolutely would. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We built our life brick by brick. Or maybe plank by plank is better, because it always felt a little like a ship on a calm sea. Stable, predictable, moving steadily forward. He was the captain, I suppose, and I was the first mate, keeping everything running smoothly below deck. We met young, just out of college, full of terrible ideas and endless optimism. We laughed a lot. We planned. Kids, a house with a big yard, retirement somewhere warm. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, more like a comfortable, familiar growth, like ivy clinging to a sturdy wall. We fit. Or I thought we did. Our routines became rituals. A coffee together on the porch on Saturdays, grocery shopping on Sundays, Tuesday night movies. Small things, unremarkable from the outside, but they were the threads that wove the tapestry of our life. He worked hard, I worked hard. We saved. We bought the house, not with a big yard, but enough. We talked about the future, the distant shape of it, hazy but promising. There was a comfort in it, a deep sense of security. I trusted him implicitly. He was my partner, my best friend, the person I told everything to. We shared secrets, fears, silly jokes. We knew each other's rhythms, the subtle shifts in mood, the unspoken language of a long relationship. The mundane felt sacred because we shared it. Even the arguments were predictable, usually over something small and quickly resolved. There was no drama, no grand passions that flared and faded, just a quiet, steady love. Looking back now, I wonder if the quiet was a warning. The lack of flares, a sign the fire was banked too low, ready to be extinguished by the slightest draft. But at the time, it felt like peace. It felt like forever. The first draft came subtly. A late night at the office. A forgotten anniversary. Little things I brushed aside, attributing them to stress or forgetfulness. We were busy, life was demanding. It was easy to make excuses. Then the phone calls started. Quick hangs-ups when I answered, a low murmur I couldn't quite make out if I happened to be near him when it rang. He started taking his phone everywhere, even into the shower. He'd always been careless with it before, leaving it on counters, letting me read over his shoulder. Now it was a part of him, guarded, protected. He was more tired, or seemed it, distant. Our Tuesday night movies became him falling asleep on the couch. The Saturday coffees were rushed. He was stressed, he said. Pressure at work. I tried to be supportive, to give him space, to not nag. I suggested weekends away, date nights, anything to reconnect. He'd agree. But then something would come up, or he'd be too tired. The space between us grew, not with arguments, but with silence. A heavy, loaded silence that filled the rooms we used to share so easily. I started to feel it in the house, this new guest, this uninvited presence that sat between us on the couch, at the dinner table. A ghost in the machine of our marriage. I started asking questions, tentative at first. Was everything okay? Was he happy? He'd snap or sigh, or just brush it off. Nothing's wrong, he'd say, but his eyes were elsewhere. Anywhere but on me. The answers felt rehearsed, hollow. The man I knew, the man who shared everything, was retreating behind a wall I couldn't see through. Doubt, a cold, thin vine, began to creep into my heart. I tried to prune it back, to tell myself I was being silly, paranoid. But the vine grew stronger, its tendrils tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. I started looking. At first, it was just a feeling, a hunch I couldn't shake. A curiosity that gnawed at me. Checking bank statements, looking for odd charges. Nothing obvious. He was careful. Too careful. Then I found the second phone. Hidden in a box in the back of his closet, buried under old sweaters. It wasn't flashy, just a burner phone, cheap and anonymous. But it was there. And that was the crack in the facade. My hands shook as I scrolled through it. Text messages, hundreds of them, back and forth with a name I didn't recognize. Short, coded messages at first. Then, bolder ones. Plans to meet, declarations of missing each other, inside jokes I didn't understand. My breath hitched in my throat, a physical pain. It felt like being punched in the gut, repeatedly. This wasn't stress. This wasn't work pressure. This was a deliberate, sustained deception. I kept scrolling, the world outside the small screen blurring. There were photos. Of them. Of them together, laughing, close. Not intimate photos, but close enough. Photos from trips I thought he'd taken for work. Photos from weekends I thought he'd spent alone. Each image was a shard of glass, slicing through my illusions. I found call logs. Dozens of calls, long ones, late at night. My finger hovered over the last number dialed. I wanted to call it. I wanted to scream into the phone, to shatter whatever world they had built together. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, the phone heavy in my hand, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. This was the moment. The inciting incident that blew apart the ship, leaving me adrift in wreckage. Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, was a lie. The man I loved, the man I built a life with, was a stranger. A betrayer. The silence in the house, that heavy, loaded silence, wasn't distance. It was the sound of a double life being lived under the same roof. Confrontation was inevitable. I couldn't live with the knowledge, the physical pain of it, another moment. I waited until he came home, acting as normal as I could manage, which wasn't very normal at all. My voice was shaking when I finally spoke his name. He looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I held out the phone. Just held it out. He saw it, and his face went white. The mask slipped, just for a second. The confident captain became a cornered animal. He started talking fast, a torrent of words. Denials, excuses, blaming me. My suspicions, my nagging, my lack of understanding. It was work stress, he insisted. The phone was for a secret project, something he couldn't tell me about yet. He grabbed for the phone, but I pulled it back. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through his frantic explanations. I know, I told him what I'd found. The texts, the calls, the pictures. His face hardened. The cornered animal became aggressive. He started yelling, accusing me of spying on him, of invading his privacy. He twisted the narrative, making me the villain for uncovering his deceit. He didn't apologize. Not for the affair, not for the lies, not for the years of deception. His anger was a shield, deflecting any possibility of guilt. It was all my fault somehow. My fault for not being enough, my fault for being too much, my fault for finding out. The confrontation wasn't a moment of truth, but a confirmation of his character, or lack thereof. He would lie, he would manipulate, he would blame. Anything to escape accountability. I realized then that the man I thought I married had never existed. He was a character he played, and I was just part of the set dressing. The days that followed were a blur of pain and logistics. The house, the shared finances, the friends who suddenly didn't know where to look. The legal process felt cold and clinical, a sharp contrast to the raw, bleeding wound of my heart. Getting a lawyer felt like admitting defeat, like accepting that the ship was not just damaged, but sunk. It was a confusing, overwhelming world of forms, jargon, and billable hours. My lawyer, a kind but pragmatic woman named Sarah, listened patiently as I poured out the story, punctuated by tears and choked back sobs. She nodded, her expression sympathetic but grounded. "It's messy," she said, "but we'll get through it." She explained the process, the divorce papers, the asset division, the discovery. Discovery. That's where the truth was supposed to come out. Financial records, emails, texts. Proof. But proof felt impossible when his lies were so deeply embedded. He continued his performance, not just to me but to everyone. He told a story of a marriage that had simply drifted apart, of two people who had grown incompatible. He conveniently omitted the part about the secret phone and the other woman. He started positioning himself as the reasonable one, the one who wanted a calm, amicable separation, while I was the emotional, irrational wife. He was already working to control the narrative. And it was working. Friends, even some of my own, started expressing sympathy for him. It felt like I was losing not just my marriage, but my reputation, my sanity. The legal battles were slow grinding. Every piece of information I needed felt guarded, hidden behind layers of his carefully constructed facade. He was stonewalling, delaying, making every step a battle. The early struggles weren't just the emotional fallout of the betrayal. They were the first cold plunges into the brutal reality of legal warfare against someone who had no compunction about lying under oath. I felt exposed, vulnerable, fighting a ghost built on deceit. As the legal process dragged on, his lies became bolder, more elaborate. In written declarations submitted to the court, he painted a picture of a marriage where he was the victim of my emotional instability. He downplayed his income, hid assets, and outright denied any financial misconduct. He even denied the affair, or at least presented it as something minor, a brief moment of weakness after the marriage had already ended in all but name. He was a master manipulator, and the legal system, designed for objective truth, seemed ill-equipped to handle such a skilled deceiver. My lawyer, Sarah, was doing her best, but we were fighting his word against mine, his carefully crafted documents against my raw, emotional truth. And in court, the judge deals with documents, with sworn statements. Emotional truth doesn't hold much weight on paper. His lawyer was aggressive, filing motions, challenging every request for information, painting me as greedy and vindictive. The legal bills were piling up, an added layer of stress on top of the emotional turmoil. I had to cut back on expenses, sell things I didn't want to sell, constantly worry about making ends meet while he seemed to be living comfortably, funded by the money he'd hidden. The unfairness of it all was a constant, burning ache. He was getting away with it. He was lying to the court, lying on official documents, and it seemed like there was nothing I could do to stop him. The system felt broken, designed to protect the cleverest liar, not the person telling the truth. Every setback felt like a confirmation of his power, his control. He was dismantling my life piece by piece, and the law, instead of protecting me, felt like another tool in his arsenal. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a fight for my financial future, my dignity, my very sense of reality. The walls were closing in, and I felt trapped, suffocating under the weight of his deception and the cold indifference of the legal process. Then came the turning point. A moment of pure despair that somehow forged itself into a steely resolve. We had a hearing about temporary support, and he testified cool and collected, minimizing his income and maximizing my supposed ability to earn. He lied about expenses, about assets I knew he had. I sat there listening, feeling my blood run cold. The judge, based on his testimony and his lawyer's arguments, made a ruling that left me with almost nothing. It was a gut punch, a devastating blow that felt like the end. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt utterly defeated. I stood on the courthouse steps, the city noise washing over me, and the full weight of my situation crashed down. I had trusted him, built my life on him, and he had not only betrayed that trust, but was now using the system to leave me financially ruined. The injustice of it was physically painful. I wanted to curl up and disappear. But as I stood there, the cold stone of the courthouse at my back, something shifted inside me. The despair didn't disappear, but it was joined by a white-hot anger. A righteous fury that burned away the last vestiges of hurt and sadness. He thought he could do this? He thought he could lie his way to a new life, leaving me in the dust? He thought he could make me disappear? A cold calm settled over me. He was good at lying, yes. But even the best lies leave traces. Loose ends. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just the quiet first mate. He didn't know I was the one who kept the logbook. I wouldn't fight him on his terms anymore. I wouldn't just react to his lies. I needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof that would blow his carefully constructed world apart. Something that would make the judge see the truth, not just the performance. The focus shifted from despair to determination. From fighting him to uncovering his secrets. The battleground changed. It wasn't just the courtroom anymore. It was his digital footprint, his past, anything he might have overlooked. The search for proof became an obsession. I knew about the second phone, but that was just a start. I needed more. I started digging through old hard drives, old cloud backups, email archives. Every digital corner of our shared life, and his life, that I could access. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, sifting through years of data, hoping to find a needle in a haystack of mundane information. Hours blurred into days, days into weeks. I felt like a detective in my own life, piecing together fragments of a story I didn't want to know. I found more emails between him and S, casual at first, then increasingly personal. Photos, scattered across different devices. Bank statements with suspicious withdrawals or transfers. Little breadcrumbs he thought he'd covered. Each discovery fueled my resolve, but also deepened the wound. Seeing the details, the casual intimacy of their messages while he was sitting across the dinner table from me, was excruciating. But I pushed the pain down. This wasn't about feeling anymore. It was about gathering evidence. About building a case. I found folders on an old laptop I thought he'd wiped clean. Work files, he'd said. But nested deep within them, mislabeled, were documents related to accounts I didn't know about. Offshore accounts? Shadowy investments? It was financial misconduct, clear as day. He wasn't just having an affair, he was hiding significant assets. That was a game changer. Lies about an affair could be explained away as personal failings. Lies about money? That was fraud. That was contempt of court. The stakes were higher now. But still, I needed something undeniable. Something that would stand up in court. Something that would shatter his carefully constructed facade of innocence. Something personal, damning, from his own mouth. The voicemails. I remembered him complaining about an old phone, one he used for work trips years ago, that had somehow synced his voicemails to a cloud service he barely used. He'd meant to delete them. Had he? I searched the cloud storage linked to his old email address. It was a long shot. Days of searching, clicking through folders, feeling the familiar creep of despair. Nothing. Just old vacation photos, documents, spam. I was about to give up, to accept that some stones were best left unturned, that maybe this lead was a dead end. And then I saw it. A folder labeled Old Audio Files. My heart leaped. Inside, a list of audio files, dated years back. Voicemails. Most were innocuous, old work calls, messages from friends. But one, labeled only by a phone number I didn't recognize, caught my eye. I clicked on it. The file loaded. And then I heard it. His voice. Low. Intimate, unmistakable. Talking to us. Not about work. About me. About our marriage. About his plans. The betrayal. The lies. The contempt. All laid bare in his own words. And then, S's voice, confirming details, planning future deceptions. It was a conversation between two conspirators, dismantling my life while I was completely unaware. I listened, frozen, the audio playing through my headphones. It wasn't just proof of the affair, it was proof of the depth of the deception, the calculated lies, the cruelty. There were several such voicemails in that folder, each one a nail in the coffin of his lies. They were raw, unedited, undeniable. He had forgotten them, overlooked them. In his arrogance, his belief that he was too smart to get caught, he had left the most damning evidence of all sitting in a forgotten corner of the internet. I downloaded them all. My hands weren't shaking anymore. There was no fear, no despair, only a cold, precise determination. I had found the weapon. Now I just needed to use it. The days leading up to the final hearing were a blur of preparation. Working with Sarah, strategizing the best way to present the voicemails. She was cautious, warning me that while they were powerful emotionally, we needed to ensure they were legally admissible. We built the case methodically, linking the voicemails to his sworn statements, highlighting the direct contradictions, the perjury. We corroborated details from the voicemails with other evidence I'd found, the hidden accounts, the suspicious travel dates. The narrative was clear. He hadn't just had an affair, he had systematically lied and defrauded to conceal it and benefit financially. The courtroom on the day of the hearing felt different. Sharper. Brighter. Every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of papers, a cough from the gallery, the low murmur of voices. He was there, across the room, flanked by his lawyer. He looked confident, almost smug. He didn't know what was coming. My heart was pounding, a heavy drumbeat against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I felt a strange sense of calm, the calm of someone walking towards the eye of a storm, knowing it will be terrible, but also knowing it will eventually pass. The morning passed slowly, presenting evidence, testimony from witnesses. Then it was his turn to testify. He took the stand, swore on the Bible, and began his performance. He spoke smoothly, denying the significant assets, portraying himself as a man of modest means. He reiterated his earlier claims about the marriage, portraying me as unstable, prone to fantasy. He addressed the affair indirectly, minimizing it as a brief, insignificant event after the marriage had already failed, a moment of weakness he regretted. He looked directly at the judge, his eyes earnest, his voice steady. He lied under oath, again and again. With every lie, I felt a surge of cold fury, a tightening in my chest. But I remained still, outwardly calm. I knew what I had. His lawyer led him through his testimony, building a case based entirely on his fabricated reality. He seemed untouchable, his lies too polished, too consistent to be easily questioned. He finished his direct examination, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. He thought he was safe. Then came the cross-examination. Sarah stood, her demeanor quiet but firm. She started with the financials, chipping away at his claims about his income and assets. She presented the documents I'd found, the records of hidden accounts. His composure wavered slightly, but he recovered quickly, offering plausible-sounding explanations, attributing discrepancies to accounting errors or misunderstandings. He was still fighting, still lying. Sarah moved on to the affair, asking direct questions, pinning him down. Did he know S? Yes, a casual acquaintance. Had they had an affair? No, absolutely not. Had he traveled with her?
No.
Had he spent money on her?
No.
He denied everything, unequivocally, under oath. He looked at me then, across the room, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. He thought he had won this round. He had stared me down and lied, and he believed the law would back him up. Sarah paused. She picked up a tablet from the table. My stomach clenched. This was it. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and steady, the petitioner has repeatedly denied the affair and any financial impropriety related to it. We have evidence that directly contradicts his testimony. She turned to the clerk. We would like to enter this audio evidence into the record and play a selection. His lawyer objected immediately, jumping to his feet, arguing relevance, authenticity, chain of custody. The usual legal maneuvers to block damning evidence. But Sarah was prepared. She presented the metadata, the source, the chain of recovery. The judge listened, her expression unreadable, then overruled the objection. "Proceed," she said, her voice quiet. A small victory, but a crucial one. Sarah walked over to the sound system and plugged in the tablet. A technician adjusted the speakers. The courtroom fell silent, a heavy, expectant quiet. All eyes were on the speakers and then on him. He was watching Sarah, a flicker of concern on his face, but still, he seemed unsure what was coming. He probably thought it was a grainy video, a shaky phone recording, something he could deny or dismiss. He didn't expect this. Sarah pressed play. The first sound was static, then a click, like a phone connecting. And then his voice. Clear, unmistakable, coming from the speakers, filling the silent courtroom. His voice. "Hey, it's me. Just leaving the meeting. Yeah, it went well. Got the transfer cleared." S's voice. Tinny through the recording. "Good. So, we're on for the weekend." His voice, softer now, intimate. "Wouldn't miss it. Just gotta come up with another excuse for the wife. She's getting suspicious. Asked about the account today." A pause. "Don't worry, handled it. Told her it was an old work thing. She bought it." Mostly a low chuckle. "Think she's losing it, honestly. Always looking for things. Makes it easy." S's voice again. "She still doesn't know about the offshore one?" His voice. "Nah, that's our little secret. Setting us up nice and cozy, aren't we?" Another chuckle, longer this time, laced with smugness. The voices continued, detailing their plans, their shared secrets, his casual contempt for me. They discussed specific dates he had claimed were work trips, mentioning destinations and activities that were clearly not business-related. They discussed the hidden accounts by name, confirming the transfers and balances. They laughed about my paranoia and his ability to manipulate me. They talked about the future they were building together, a future funded by the money he was stealing from our shared life, money he was now lying to the judge about. The sound filled the room. My ex-husband sat on the stand, his face draining of color with every word spoken by his past self. The confident facade crumbled, piece by piece, under the weight of his own recorded voice. His lawyer was on his feet again, sputtering objections, but the judge waved him down. She was listening intently, her expression now one of cold, assessing focus. The air in the room was thick with tension, every ear strained to catch the damning words. The voices played on, calm and casual, discussing betrayal as if it were a business transaction. He started to fidget on the stand. His eyes darted around the room, first at me, then at the judge, then at the floor. The smugness was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no sound came out. He looked like a man watching a train wreck he'd set in motion, unable to stop it. Sarah let a few more minutes of the recording play, ensuring the key details about the affair, the travel, and the specific financial accounts were clearly heard. Then she stopped it. The sudden silence in the courtroom was deafening. The only sound was his ragged breathing from the stand. Sarah turned to him, her voice quiet, devoid of emotion. "Petitioner," she said, using the formal legal term, "is that your voice?" He stared at her, his eyes wide, unseeing. He didn't answer. She repeated the question, more firmly this time. "Mr. his last name, is that your voice on the recording?" He swallowed hard. His jaw worked. He looked physically ill. He couldn't deny it. His own words, his own voice, were indisputable. The carefully constructed edifice of lies he had built over months, years, not just in court but in our life together, collapsed in that instant. The judge was watching him, her gaze steady and piercing. The gallery was silent, breathless. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. He opened his mouth again. He tried to speak. A strangled sound came out. His hands went to his chest. His eyes rolled back. And then he pitched forward. Not dramatically, Not like in a movie, but a sudden, boneless collapse onto the witness stand table. Papers scattered. A gasp went through the room. The courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. His lawyer rushed forward. Bailiffs moved towards the stand. Someone called for a medic. I sat frozen in my chair, watching his collapsed form. The shock of it was profound. I had anticipated anger, denial, legal maneuvering. I had anticipated him being exposed. But not this. Not a physical collapse under the weight of his own truth, revealed by his own voice. The hearing was immediately adjourned. He was attended to, eventually helped out of the courtroom. The silence returned, but it was different now. Charged. The air still vibrated with the sound of his voice, the echo of his lies and his downfall. My lawyer looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of shock and quiet victory. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The voicemails had said it all. Walking out of the courthouse later, the bright afternoon sun felt harsh after the dim courtroom. The world outside was moving on, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded within those walls. I felt a profound exhaustion, the kind that settles deep in your bones after a long, brutal fight. There was no elation, no sense of triumph, just a cold, quiet satisfaction. He had lied, he had betrayed, he had tried to destroy me. But his own arrogance, his own forgotten words, had been his undoing. The plot twist wasn't just finding the voicemails, it was their impact, the way they utterly and physically broke him in the very place he thought his lies were safest. He was blindsided by the reality of his own past catching up to him, delivered by the person he had so carelessly discarded and underestimated. The legal process concluded swiftly after that. With the undeniable evidence of perjury and financial misconduct, his position was untenable. The judge's ruling was clear, taking his dishonesty into account. I received a fair settlement, the assets he had tried to hide accounted for. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine, financially and emotionally. I didn't gloat. There was no triumphant call, no message sent. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth had prevailed, undeniable and brutal. Starting over is hard. The ship is sunk, and I'm building a new one, piece by piece. The comfort of the old life is gone, replaced by the uncertainty of the future. But there's also a strange sense of freedom. The weight of the lies is lifted. The man I thought I knew is gone, and while that's a loss, it's also a release. I learned a hard lesson about trust, about looking beneath the surface, about the stories people tell themselves and others. I also learned about my own resilience. I didn't break. I didn't disappear. I fought. I found the truth, and I stood in court and played his own words, his own undoing. He collapsed. I stood tall. There's a quiet power in that, a strength forged in the fire of betrayal. The bitterness lingers, a shadow that follows me. But it's not the only thing. There's also a sense of possibility, a horizon I can finally see clearly, without the fog of lies. The future isn't the one I planned, but it's mine. And this time, I'm the captain, navigating by the stars I can trust. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.